Hey there, so I wanted to show you another example. This one is going to be basically placing particles on a form we've already created. So in this case, the form that we've already created is our GUI mesh. We've got our disformer that sort of pulls that thing around. And we might want to place particles on top of that. So you can think, maybe I wanted to randomly place hairs all over this to make it a hairy GUI mesh instead. In order to do that, we need to be able to put forms on top of other forms. So that's what this tutorial is going to try and show you. So the first thing we're going to do is create a new game object, and we'll call this particles on dynamic mesh. And we're going to have add a simulation to that. So that simulation that we're going to use is going to be called place dynamic mesh particles. So the name in the buffer there is going to be particle buffer, actually. And then we're going to need a form, a life, and a mesh verts, which is going to be our mesh that we basically place the objects on. So the mesh that we're placing the objects on is our GUI mesh. Our form are going to be particles on dynamic mesh, which is basically a form that has a different struct size. And that different struct size basically means more information is being passed into the compute shader that we're going to use. That means that we're also going to need a different debug material. So we're going to basically do 0.24 instead of our normal 0.16 for our debug. We'll make sure that the debug's on. And you can see that there's a mesh property here, which is basically going to be the mesh that we're placing the points on. It's also going to be the same mesh that's our GUI mesh is made out of. So it's important that those are the same. And then there's noise type and noise size, those default, but basically you could be placing the particles in slightly more interesting ways. So that's our form out of the way. What does it mean for our life, though? So we put in our life, and then our life is basically going to run a simulation that is called place particles on dynamic mesh. The kernel name for that is transfer. So basically, we've got this whole situation set up. We've got our particles debug mode on, so hopefully we should see it when we run it. And then we have to assign our life here. So the last thing we're hopefully going to need to do is to place it into our entire cycle. So I'm going to make it execute after everything else in the GUI life, just to make sure that it's executing at the right time with the right information. So I just drag and drop it there, and then press Control B. Oh, the length is 0, and that is because we basically need to set the count for our particles. So let's set that count to whatever the heck we want. Let's make it 10,000. Let's make it actually run. So you can see that now there's all these tiny little particles, or not so tiny little particles, that are placed along our GUI mesh. Which is pretty cool because it means that sort of like I'm taking some information, I'm passing it to other information, and then I can continue that process forever, which is what we'll look at in the next tutorial. Thanks for watching.